Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Andy Ogles. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
I want to extend a big congratulations to you. You won re-election last month, and one of those top issues facing voters was the economy. So I think that's a good place to start. What are you going to do in your next term of Congress to deliver an economy that works for the American people?
Yeah, I mean, so when you look at the results of the election, we won. President Donald Trump won the White House, and going into the election, I was cautiously optimistic that we would win the White House. But the surprise, I think, for most people is that he swept all of the swing states, not only dominating the Electoral College, but also winning the popular vote. And to your point, I think that was a mandate from the American people of the two top issues: one, the economy, and two, the southern border. So part of it is, and those two issues really go in tandem. And kind of looped into that is some of the crime in some of the cities, is that you have to secure our border. We have to fix the immigration system. That being said, we also have to get government out of the way of industry and to unleash this economy. So I was just on a plane with an executive from the trucking industry, and he was talking about their forecast for 2025 is a booming trucking business because they're going into the Trump economy. So whether it's when you look at the kind of the 2025 predictions, analyst predictions for Walmart, a 4+ % growth, or you're looking at the trucking industry, everything on the ground is saying that the economy, the markets are anticipating great success under President Trump.
Let's talk about that. You want to unleash the economy. How specifically will you do that once Donald Trump is back in office?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you've seen under the Biden administration is some of the weaponization of government against industry. So I affectionately refer to it as the NERD committee. It's the financial services. So that's dealing with the stock market and the banking space. And whether it's the CFPB, the FDIC, I mean, the whole laundry list of those alphabet agencies, are creating additional burdens for the banking sector. But what that does is those costs get passed on to the consumer. And so by getting some of this administrative state, this extra branch of government that our founding fathers warned us against, to start rolling back the administrative state so that Congress is, quite frankly, doing our jobs, and that we're doing more legislating versus passing the buck onto some of these agencies. And so part of that is just really, increasing the ability for that small business owner to start a business. And when you look at the average price of the house, and entry into the real estate market right now has gone up significantly. So that first home buyer can actually buy a home. There's a lot of things that have to happen all at once. Just before Thanksgiving, I called President Trump to talk about, funding for the government expires on December 20th. And so what are we going to do as we go into this first and second quarter of this new Congress? And what are his priorities as we go forward to make sure that we don't unintentionally hamstring or restrict him in his first 100 days, which I think are critical, whether it's the economy, whether it's foreign policy, et cetera, is that we've got to hit the ground running. And I can tell you from, I talk to the president roughly once a week, that he is ready and raring to go. And quite frankly, January 20th can't get here soon enough.
Can you talk a little bit about those conversations for us? Take us on the phone, if you could, the best you can. What are those conversations like? What is he laying out to you specifically that are his priorities?
Well, I could do a Trump impersonation for you, but I'll probably get me in trouble because I'm not very good at it. But so true story. It's the morning after the election, and I'm fixing breakfast for the family. So we try to have a full breakfast every morning that I'm home. And I said, hey kids, what do you think? Would y'all like to call the president? And so I pick up the phone and I warn them, look, he's busy. He would have been up all night. We'll leave a message, but we'll all say congratulations, Mr. President. So it rings, and on the third ring, I'm like, okay, kids, here we go. And my wife's standing there, and he picks up. And of course, there's that moment of, oh goodness, I wasn't quite ready for this conversation. But here you have the president of the United States, the president-elect, who would have been up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, who is taking the time early in the morning to talk to my family. So one, that's a part of President Trump that a lot of people don't get to see, is that he appreciates those personal touches. He appreciates relationships. But in those conversations on that weekly basis, whether it's by way of text or on the phone, is that he's really prioritizing what do we have to get done for the American people in that first 100 days. Because look, he has Congress, the House of Representatives, for 2 years. So we have to get a lot done right away understanding that whether it's EPA or some of these other agencies, that they're liable to be lawsuits. And so it's very much about the mandate that he was giving and doing what's best for the American people. And I will say on this foreign policy front, he's told Ukraine and Russia to cut it out and figure it out. He's told Hamas to give up the hostages or else. And so you're even seeing before he's sworn into office, the world is taking note and saying, you know what? There's a new sheriff in town, and it's time to get our houses in order because the president of the United States is taking this seriously, just like the 25% tariff on Mexico. I was quoted in the media saying, look, the Mexican government has been complicit in one of the largest human trafficking operations in history. We now have 10 million people here illegally. It's time for them to pay. And what happens? The president of Mexico has a conversation with the president and says, you know what, we're going to reverse the flow of illegals into your country. And so it's that type of leadership, whether you like Trump or not, it's that type of leadership that gets us back on track, restores public trust in the government, Congress, and the alphabet agencies as we move forward is, look, we have a job, we have a mandate, we're going to execute for the American people.
Let's talk about January 20th specifically, once Donald Trump is sworn in. You did mention those tariffs, so why don't we start there? Multiple studies and economists have said that those tariffs would have a negative impact on the economy. You're for them, so what do you say to those studies and those economists who say, hey, this could raise inflation?
Well, to be clear, I'm actually not for tariffs, but in the context of his policy in that moment to send a message to Mexico, it was the right message to send. So when you're looking at a tariff, it should be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. It should be used very specifically for a specific reason and for a specific outcome, whether that's for our economy or regarding national security. But like you said, tariffs tend to be, it tends to end up in some sort of trade conflict. It can historically grow out of proportion. And so but I think what's important about Donald Trump is that if he says he's willing to do it, he's willing to do it. But what that does is that brings Canada, it brings Mexico, it brings other countries to the table to have those conversations, understanding that we are going to look out for our mutual interest and how we both can get along in this economic space together. But that being said, President Trump was right calling out Mexico and Canada for some of their culpability in the illegal immigration and the fentanyl crisis.
He said he's going to levy a 25% tariff rate on Mexican and Canadian imports. He's also going to levy a steep tariff on China. Do you agree with these? When you're talking to the president in your weekly conversations, what are you saying to him about these tariffs?
Well, again, I think part of that is, the art of the deal. He's letting them know that that's on the table so that hopefully it's not necessary. So I don't think you're going to see, I cannot speak for the president of the United States. I don't think you're going to see a 25% tariff on Mexico or on China or on Canada rather. Now, China is a whole different animal. You now have the report that was just released by the COVID committee, the select committee talking about it. Quite frankly, most likely did come from a lab in China. Quite frankly, they did know about it. They waited to tell the world before they addressed it. And so they have been a bad actor for quite some time. And I think Trump is going to be tough on China. But again, what that does is brings China to the table. So whether it's supply chains or trade or whatever else is going on back and forth, and to have a more fair and balanced relationship going forward. And look, China wants to be the sole superpower. That is a fact. They think in terms of dynasty. We think in terms of Starbucks. We're very kind of more short-termed in our way of viewing the world. But that being said, is you have a president who understands that. And again, you've got Ukrainian Zelensky, the president, saying, hey, we're willing to give up land in pursuit of peace, because he recognizes Trump, and he said it, and I'll paraphrase, I'm not going to start wars as a president, I'm going to end wars.
In about 7 weeks, the Republicans will control the House, the Senate. Donald Trump will be president once again. But in the House specifically, where you're going to be serving another term, Republicans have a slim majority. So in what ways, specifically when it comes to those big issues like the economy, like immigration, do you see the GOP working with Democrats?
Well, I think you're going to see in some cases. I mean, obviously, that's going to be on a case-by-case example. I think you've had some Democrats saying that they want to join in the cutting, the DOGE committee, and cutting parts of the government, cutting part of the fat out of the bureaucracy. We are barreling towards 36, soon to be $37 trillion in debt. Like, something has to be done. We may disagree on exactly what gets cut, but that's part of, John Quincy Adams love the House of Representatives because that's where you argued and debated, right? It's like we're supposed to argue these things out. We're supposed to represent the American people. We're supposed to disagree. But what hopefully happens is that in the end, we have this better outcome that you send to the Senate and send to the President of the United States. But that being said, I think you're going to see we do have a razor thin majority. I think you'll continue to see that for the next few Congresses, that because of redistricting, you only have about 24 seats that are ever going to be competitive until the next census. And so you're going to have this very narrow margin. I think you're going to see some bipartisanship. I do believe under President Trump's leadership and with Mike Johnson, and of course, in the Senate, you're going to see more Republican kind of cohesion. I'll predict for the first 6 months. After that, I can't make a prediction, but for the first 6 months, you're going to see a lot of everyone working together to try to get us on the right track for the economy, for the American people. Six months in a day, I don't know what'll happen.
Well, let's talk about those 6 months then while I have you. Where specifically are you going to see that Republican cohesion?
Yeah, I think, clearly first, I think, and again, I can't speak for the president, he's going to act swiftly to undo some of the Biden executive orders on the border and securing the border. I think you're going to see some deportations rather quickly. Obviously, that's liable to be litigated. And then behind that, you're going to see Congress moving to, you have House Bill 1, which was our energy independence bill. You have House Bill 2, which was to secure the border, et cetera. We passed a lot of good policy in the House of Representatives in the 118th Congress that the Senate never took up. So we have a template. We have a playbook that we can draw from. We've already run these plays. They've already been debated on the House floor. And so we can very easily re-up those. The vast majority of Congress is coming back. And so we can hit those and hit the ground running, which again is in my conversations kind of to emphasize President Trump is really focused on those first 100 days and making sure that we hit the ground running, that there isn't a lot of unnecessary disruptions so that we can get everything on track for the American people.
Is there anything in that playbook, especially when you look at the first 100 days, that where you're going to cut federal spending, and where can we expect that if so?
Well, I think when you're looking at major cuts, that will take some time, but we know there's a lot of waste. We know there's a lot of fraud. And again, government by its nature is kind of designed to grow. We need to incentivize departments like you have to do at the local level. I was a county mayor or county executive prior to, where you try to incentivize your department heads they're not penalized if they can actually save $1 or $2 year over year. But that's not the way the federal government is designed to work. So we've got to get in there. And quite frankly, when you look at discretionary spending, which is that small portion of the budget that we tend to fight over, we can't cut enough out of that to fix the $36 trillion in debt. So we're going to have to grow our way out of this. We didn't get here overnight. We've got to unleash prosperity. We have to unleash the economy. And again, cut where you can and think long term as far as balancing the budget and those sorts of things. But also we've got to grow the economy, which has been a little more difficult under the Biden, or a lot more difficult under the Biden administration.
I want to talk about growing the economy with Trump's cabinet picks. I want to get your reaction to two of them. Hedge fund executive Scott Bessent is going to be the Treasury Secretary, or was nominated. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think, again, what you're going to see is there's being on the NERD committee, the Financial Services Committee. I talk a lot with bankers and those that work in the stock market. And one of the things that, their perspective is the uncertainty with some of these regulatory agencies, and that they're continually making new regulations by way of rule. And all that to say is that, is they're creating laws by rule. And that creates uncertainty for them as far as how much cash do they have on hand in regards to their loans? What are the regulatory, the next thing that they're going to be hit on in some sort of audit? And so they're always trying to anticipate this continual overreach of these regulatory bodies. And I think what you'll see out of Treasury and some of these other alphabet agencies out of the CFPB is kind of unwinding some of that overreach. You've seen Chopra, during COVID and beyond, really exerting the influence of the CFPB in the financial sector, really beyond its kind of original intent, which is to protect the consumer, not necessarily to overregulate an industry. And so that becomes a problem when you have layer after layer of regulation coming at you. When I'm talking about the banking sector from different directions, And so again, we've got to really streamline the process, give certainty to the banks and to the markets as they go forward. And so again, when you look at the banking sector for the United States of America, we have a very dynamic sector. We have small banks, we have those mid-sized regional banks, and of course you have the larger banks for those big institutional investors. And what you're seeing is this squeeze on these mid-sized banks as they're starting to grow. The regulatory burden as they're crossing into that next threshold is crushing. So it's forcing them, in essence, out of business and having to merge into with the larger banks. And that's a problem if you're Joe the plumber, because it's that mid-sized regional bank in your community that is going to be your first lender, whether it's for your small business or for your home. They know you, they know your business and those types of things. You're seeing those types of banks slowly dwindling away. When you look at Europe, you don't have a very dynamic banking sector the way we have in the United States of America. And what we don't want to do is end up like Europe. We want those small, mid-size, those regional banks, and of course the big banks. They all have their space, but this regulatory burden that is really hitting these small to mid-sized banks is crushing. And when you look at their growth rate relative to their cost of operations, it's out of whack.
I'm curious.
I know that was a lot of nerdy. Go ahead.
No, I like it. We're Forbes. You're speaking my language there, so I like it, and I'm very curious to hear your reaction to Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick. He was tapped to serve as Trump's Commerce Secretary. In a report for Forbes, one of my colleagues found that one of Lutnick's former partners called him the most hated guy on Wall Street. What are your thoughts on the pick, and does that concern you?
Well, whether or not he's liked or disliked doesn't mean that he's not going to do a great job for the president. I've had the opportunity to meet with him once. As fate would have it, he was in Nashville with the president at the Bitcoin conference, and we actually, someone had breached security, and so myself and Lutnick and a couple other folks, we actually got trapped in a room together for security reasons for about an hour as the Secret Service was clearing the area and making sure it was safe, which it was. And so I actually had a very pleasant conversation with him. He seemed to be very nice, very knowledgeable. And quite frankly, he speaks Trump's language. He understands what Trump is wanting to accomplish. And so to have that interpersonal relationship, someone who sees Trump's vision, I think is incredibly important as you go forward. Now, look, at the end of the day, you have Congress. There's going to be some checks and balances. And so that's a good thing. But it's important to have those individuals like myself, like Lutnick, or whomever that speak with Trump. They know Trump and they get his vision. Meanwhile, we're going to uphold our oaths to office as well.
You find yourself in really interesting conversations, whether it be with your family and Donald Trump the day after the election, or trapped in a room with the Commerce Secretary nominee. I mean, I want to be a fly on the wall for these. But before I let you go, I would like to totally make a left turn here and ask your reaction to some news that broke over the weekend. In a reversal, President Joe Biden did pardon his son, Hunter Biden, and the move effectively erases tax and gun convictions against the president's son. What's your reaction to the news?
Well, I'll be honest with you. A blind man could see that coming a mile away. I mean, when you look at the Oversight Committee, the work of Chairman Comer, there's a lot of questions about foreign monies flowing to the Biden family. I think this was very predictable. I think him saying that he wasn't going to do it was campaign rhetoric. In reality, anyone who was paying attention knew that he would do that. And quite frankly, I think there's a good chance that he will pardon his brother, perhaps his niece, or some of these other individuals that have been mentioned in the investigations. And so that way, I'm not assigning any guilt to anyone. But that being said, I think it was completely predictable and expected that he was going to do this. The question is, did he do it? Was he going to do it now, or was he going to do it, Christmas Eve kind of thing? This was no surprise to anyone who was paying attention.
I spoke with your colleague, Congressman Tim Burchett, yesterday, and he agreed with your sentiment there that he thinks that President Biden is going to pardon more of his family members. Some of your colleagues have also suggested that there should be impeachment charges brought up against the president. Is that something you agree with?
At this point, my focus is on those first 100 days, making sure that we are really answering the mandate given to Trump and to the House and to the Senate to fix the economy, to secure the border, to make cities safe again. I mean, crime, and look, even in Tennessee, All of our cities, we have some of the most violent gangs out of Central and South America are in Tennessee. They've never been in the United States before. Why? Because of the southern border. So every small town in America is now a border town because of fentanyl, because of the crime syndicates that are sweeping this country. That is the mission. We've got to fix that. And so, look, should Joe Biden have been impeached? Yes. There's a laundry list of things that he should have been impeached for. For whatever reason, Jordan and Comer were unable to get that done. We also had an election that had to be won. But that being said, I'm not going to armchair quarterback that, nor am I going to distract my colleagues or the president from his mission of answering the call of the American people to make America great again.
Well, Congressman, I appreciate the conversation today. And as you kick things off in the first 100 days, starting January 20th, I hope you can come back on and join me. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.